Welcome into a Monday edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball Pod. Dick Whalen, Alex Barutha, back with you as we are every Monday afternoon. We are brought to you by Underdog. We're brought to you by FanDuel. Underdog Fantasy is the number one platform for NBA best ball and DFS player pickup contests. If you haven't tried Underdog yet, new users receive a first-time deposit bonus up to $100 and a free 6-month subscription to RotoWire with promo code RWNBA. That's RWNBA. UnderdogFantasy.com, or you can download the Underdog app right now. Use that code RWNBA. That'll get you your free RotoWire subscription. 6 months, all access to everything on the site, plus that deposit bonus. FanDuel can tackle millions in prizes all playoffs long in FanDuel Fantasy Contest. If you're new to fantasy, there's no better time to get in on the action because right now, new customers get a 100% deposit match up to $100. Playing fantasy for huge cash prizes on FanDuel is fun. It's exciting. Just draft your lineup, watch your team move up the leaderboard. I was playing on FanDuel for championship weekend. I was out in a legal gambling state last week, so fired up the FanDuel app, threw in some bets for championship weekend. Love doing that. Make it super easy on the FanDuel app. Plus, with FanDuel, you could choose from full slate contests. So you can do multiple games, single game contests, season-long best ball, beginner only. Those are great if you're new to fantasy. Basically, any kind of contest or any kind of bet you want to play, you can find it on FanDuel. And when you win, the best part is you get paid right away, instantly. So with the Super Bowl coming up, get that 100% deposit match up to $100. Go to FanDuel.com to start playing for huge cash prizes today. All right, we got that business out of the way, Alex. Good to talk to you again, man. As you can see, it's very sunny here in the greater Milwaukee area as I continue to piece together my new office. Thought we ordered blinds last week, and I'm sitting, watching the Lions 49ers game with my wonderful wife, whom I love, last night. And she's like, oh yeah, it looks like I never actually ordered those. They're still sitting in my cart. So I'm being blinded. I can't even see my second monitor because the sun is hitting it directly, but hopefully in like 10 minutes or so, the sun will be low enough that we'll have a little bit better visibility. But how are you? How was your weekend? I assume you watched plenty of basketball and plenty of football.
Watched plenty of basketball, caught some of the highlights from the football game. Yeah, honestly, a pretty standard weekend for me. Just kind of hunkered down. At least the weather's getting a little bit better here in Wisconsin. The snow is almost melted, actually.
I was in Arizona last week, and we were coming back from the airport on Saturday afternoon, and I said to Molly, it's like, this is like the time of year where if you're visiting Wisconsin, you're like, why would anybody ever want to live here? Because like the highways are just like a gray, brown sludge. There's like whoever these people are that like throw stuff out of their car. I don't understand littering, especially on a highway. Insane. But it's like just like kind of garbagey. There's like sticks all over the place. Like this is the depths of living in Wisconsin. I think the month of February is like the absolute worst. But you're right. I've almost been scared to look at my weather.com app for the last few weeks, but we're creeping up into the 40s in the Milwaukee area. Big weekend, of course, in fantasy basketball. We'll talk some waiver wire. Already got a couple good questions in the chat. As always, throw those in there. Second half of the pod, we'll take as many live viewer questions as we can. I went ham, Alex. Ham, sicko mode, whatever you want to call it, on the waiver wire this weekend, particularly in the stake league. I basically swapped out my entire bench. We have a decent amount of teams on 4-game weeks, so it made it a little bit easier, I think, to pick and choose and kind of decide, which of these lower level players are worth a shot. But I ended up getting Harrison Barnes, who, I know what I'm walking into here. I'm buying at the absolute peak on Harrison Barnes. I think I only paid like $4 or $5. I thought it might take a little more to get him based on how good he's been for the last week. But Harrison Barnes does this once or twice a year, right? Where he'll go like 15 games in a row without scoring more than 12 points. And then he'll remind you for a brief period why he was the number one overall player in his high school class.
Yeah, very bizarre season for Barnes, who, like had a pretty nice stretch. Like when he started with Sacramento, this is technically his worst season, probably since like his last year with Golden State. Mm-hmm. But like you said, he's really turned up his scoring lately. Kevin Huerter has turned up his scoring lately. So yeah, I think the Kings are probably looking for something a little bit different because I think they realize if they continued playing the same way, featuring the same guys the same ways, that they were going to probably continue to be very middling. But they're turning a little bit of a corner here, at least with some role players playing better.
Yeah, I mean, Kings are on a 4-game week, so that was part of the thinking with Barnes. And again, I'm trying to temper my expectations here. Like if he just has one 20-point game in the next 4, I feel like my ROI is going to be decent there. I ended up bait with a couple of guys who just, weren't major contributors. I picked up Cody Martin, as we talked about on the pod a couple of weeks ago. Immediately got hurt. Even when he's played, he's just been pretty low level. He's had some decent blocks and steals games, but those are pretty hit or miss. So didn't think twice really about dropping him. Dropped DeLon Wright, who I always like as a steal specialist, but he was basically playing like 8 to 12 minutes. You just can't really do a whole lot with that. In addition to Barnes, I got Precious Achiuwa. I'm trying to blocks and rebounds are two categories I'm trying to move up in this league. So was pretty happy to end up landing Achiuwa, paid a couple of bucks for him. Went out and got Jared Vanderbilt from the Lakers as well, who's played really well of late, playing more minutes. Defensive stats have been off the charts. I don't even think I'm going to end up starting Vanderbilt, but feeling a little bit better about my depth in that league. Did you have any thoughts on any of those guys or any big additions you made?
No, I think those are all solid guys to add in a 16-team league, who may have decent rest of season value. Cody Martin is kind of interesting to me. I don't know what they're going to do with him at the deadline. Part of me worries about him because he's 28 and maybe they would ship him off. And he's been injury prone lately, so they're going to shut him down. But there's another part of me that's like, what if it just ends up being 35 minutes of Cody Martin after some other guys are traded away and he ends up returning top 100 value from basically here on out or after the trade deadline.
If he returns top 100 value, that's on me. I guess that's a risk. That's a risk I'm willing to take when it comes to Cody Martin. And on the Achiuwa front, I think he was the guy I was most excited to get. Obviously, he's played well lately, and part of that is Isaiah Hartenstein has missed some time. He was back on Saturday against Miami. Played only 16 minutes. Kind of hard to gauge. After missing 2 games with an Achilles injury, which can be something that nags you a little bit. But then we got, the Julius Randle shoulder dislocation, and we finally got a timetable today. I think we probably just see him after the All-Star break. I think that would make the most sense. So it should have a nice little run here where Achiuwa, even if he's coming off the bench, behind Isaiah Hartenstein, just looking for rebounds, looking for some blocks, and he's, a pretty high volume per minute guy in both of those numbers. Vanderbilt has been going nuts. I mean, I kind of wrote him off earlier in the season. I've always thought he's been a little overrated. When the Lakers first got him, there's oh man, he's this perfect defensive Swiss Army knife, and I just never really got it. Even in the playoffs last year when they were rolling, he was only playing 20 minutes a game. It just didn't really seem like they trusted him all that much. Playing time's been up a little bit lately. Double-digit scoring in 3 straight. Rebounds have been there. He has 10 steals over his last 3 games. So again, like most waiver wire guys in a 16-team league, you're kind of buying high and not necessarily expecting that to continue. But, if I'm targeting rebounds and defensive stats, I just wanted another option there.
Yeah, on the Achiuwa front, I'm curious to see how Tibbs handles the Randall injury. I think it'll just be more like Grimes and Josh Hart and Dante DiVincenzo. I'm kind of worried Achiuwa is going to get stuck. But again, you're talking about a 16-team league. I think you need to take the chance that Achiuwa sees 5 to 10 more minutes a game. And then for Vanderbilt, it's he's one of those guys who can run hot. And the Lakers are still kind of searching for answers, right? So I think he can be part of that because he can play sort of the 3 through the 5, small ball 5 in certain lineups. He's pretty versatile in that way. Yeah. Still not a great 3-point shooter or anything, but a decent pickup for the size league you're talking about.
Yeah, again, this is our 16-team staff insider league, very competitive. Everybody knows what they're doing. You don't really steal a lot of bargains in this league. I accounted for a third of the transactions this week, which is usually not a good thing. That usually doesn't mean you're lapping the field. But some other notables, our guy Ken Kreitz, who you hosted on Friday, he dropped Brandon Podziemski, picked up Larry Nance. James ended up picking up Obi Toppin. Georges Niang was added. Jonte Porter was dropped. I thought one pretty interesting one, Shannon, who's doing well in this league, dropped Mason Plumlee. Plumlee had a 12-12 double-double over the weekend, but he dropped him and picked up Amen Thompson from Houston.
Yeah, Plumlee's been a little underwhelmed. He'll have a 0, 2, and 2 game, exactly. And he'll have a 12. It's just really hard to predict what's going to happen. And I don't know Shannon's team inside and out. He might not need the rebounds, but Amen Thompson, he has seen double-digit minutes in 8 straight games, averaging 9, 6, and 3 with basically 2.5 stocks. Which is fantastic. He's at 1.1 fantasy points per minute on the season. So, Houston, Houston started the season so hot, and they are now down to 21 and 24. And some of that's like they've been missing Tari Eason. Dylan Brooks missed a decent amount of time. They haven't been especially healthy lately, but I think Thompson has sort of forced his way into the rotation, at least until Eason comes back. But I really am getting worried about this Eason injury because it's really nondescript, like lower left leg injury management, and he's just been out for like a month.
Yeah, when it transitions from like a day-to-day injury to injury management, that's usually not a great sign. He's already been ruled out for tonight's game, has not played since New Year's Day. So I think this could be one of those things where even if he's back in a week or two, maybe he hasn't lost a spot in the rotation, but he kind of lost the momentum that he had picked up in December and early January, and it might be hard to kind of grab that back because when he was playing well, Amen Thompson was either still out or just working his way back from that early season injury. So it kind of might be an either or situation. Speaking of the Rockets, in my NFBKC, I went out, finally dropped Marcus Smart. I think it's time. We talked about the risk reward there. I just don't think the reward is all that high. I think it's in the realm of possibility that he just like barely plays and maybe not even again this season, depending on where the Grizzlies are. Although they've been pretty respectable, since all these injuries hit. I mean, they're still 13th in the Western Conference, but they haven't been this complete disaster like we thought they might be. But I grabbed Cam Whitmore in place of Marcus Smart, added Kevin Huerter in that league as well. And I think everything we just said about Easton and Amen Thompson kind of applies to Whitmore too.
It does. Another guy who is exactly at 1.1 fantasy points per minute. We know he's a scorer. He's a top, what would you say? Like he's probably a top 10 talent in the draft that slipped because of like injury concerns. So, we know that possibility is there. Spent some early time in the G League.
Put up ridiculous numbers in the G League, by the way. Like this guy is not afraid to shoot the ball.
Of course. And it is another situation where it's like Jalen Green's minutes, like there'll be nights where Jalen Green will play 39 minutes and he'll play 27 minutes. There have been moments where Jabari Smith's minutes have been up and down. Like I think Ime Udoka is searching for answers again, and Whitmore's ability to just put up points. If it's between Jalen Green and Cam Whitmore, they're both producing so little in anything other than scoring that it's like you might as well just play the one that's hot. If you're Udoka.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 4-game week coming up for the Houston Rockets. I mean, the vast majority of the NBA has 4 games this week. I think 22 teams are on a 4-game week, and then we have 8 teams on a 3-game week. No 2-gamers, so that's a good thing. But Atlanta, Brooklyn, Chicago, Dallas, Detroit, Golden State, New Orleans, and Toronto are the 3-game week teams. So, one of those weeks where, not ideal to have Luka carrying your team, although, given what he's doing, doesn't even matter. Obviously, you're still starting him in a 3-game week. Schedule-wise, not something that you really had to factor in all that much unless you're really working the margins. Did you do anything notable in your NFBKC or any other big-time leagues?
I didn't. I have decent benches in those in most of my leagues. In keeper league, I pulled the plug, sold off Yusuf Nurkic. Looking to move off. Anunoby has been kind of hit or miss for me in terms of if I want to keep or not. Fielding some offers for him, but in my NFBKC league, we had a $51 bid for Josh Hart. Again, this is out of 1,000. Someone added Vanderbilt. Someone added Whitmore, Nembhard. Fultz got picked up. Wiggins got picked up. As did Harrison Barnes for $6. So. Pretty active. A lot of the guys we touched on already, I think are getting picked up in a lot of leagues.
Of note, somebody grabbed Desmond Bane in my NFBKC. I think we noted on the pod last week that he was dropped a week ago. I thought about it. He was out there. Somebody got him for $2. It's not like it's $1,000 budget. It's not like he had to spend $400 for it. So I think for that price, if you're like, I have so many injuries on my team that I couldn't really afford to do that, and you don't have an IR slot in NFBKC. So that was really the deciding factor for me. But if you have a healthy team and you're willing to kind of wait this out with the All-Star break coming up, I don't really have a problem. And again, if you're in a league with 1 or 2 IR slots, then I think Bane is a high enough upside player to me relative to someone like Marcus Smart that if I could afford it, I'm more than happy to hold on to him and just kind of hope that you get even 15 games later in the year.
Yeah, he should be picked up if you have the spot for it. There's no reason not to if you're not going to do anything with that bench spot anyway. I guess the best case scenario, he comes back like the last week of February, right after the All-Star break. Yeah, if you got the spot, grab him.
Did you think about adding John Konchar anywhere? He was not picked up in the stake league. He was on my list. He was kind of lower in my waterfall, so I ended up not getting him by virtue of picking up some of the other guys that I mentioned earlier. But he started now 6 games in a row. The scoring has been very underwhelming. The rebounding's kind of been all over the place. He had an 11-point, 10 rebound double last week, kind of out of nowhere. Then, of course, 1 rebound in 26 minutes the next night. So that's not necessarily sustainable, but kind of blocking a ton of shots out of nowhere. And he's always been somebody who's snuck in a few blocks here or there. But he had a 5-block game against Toronto early last week. He's had multiple blocks now in 4 of his last 5 games. I was a little bit surprised that somebody did grab him. Never mind. Ryan Pohl, who's actually leading the league, got John Konchar. And this is why I didn't get him. He paid $9 out of a $100 budget.
Ryan is a dedicated listener to the Friday podcast, and I suggested John Konchar last week. Off the waiver
start
wire.
Giving him bad advice, man.
I know. I got to start. Yes, I don't even know what the term is for that. Yes, give him bad advice. I think Konchar is a decent ad. I didn't have anybody I really wanted to drop for him. I would have thought about Horford. I would have thought about DSJ. But that's pretty borderline to me. But yeah, I think he should be picked up in 16-team leagues. I think the blocks are probably too hot. Like, I don't think the blocks are going to continue like the way they are. But he's just kind of been like a guy who, I made this joke about Tillman at one point, where it's probably more accurate for someone like Konchar, where it's like points, rebounds, and assists. You just like grab 3 dice and you shake them and you roll them. And that's the number he has in each category. It's just like any given, he could have, 2 points, 7 rebounds, 1 assist, and then he'll be 9 assists, 9 rebounds, 1 point. He's one of those guys.
Sticking with the Grizzlies, Gigi Jackson played well yesterday. I'm still skeptical of him fantasy wise. It's been very boom or bust. The minutes have kind of been up and down, but looked pretty good yesterday against Indiana. 18 points, 1 steal, 1 block, 4 rebounds, hit a couple of threes, 6 of 9 from the field. 29 minutes for him off the bench. And Vince Williams, who we've talked about a lot over the last couple of weeks, I think we identified him as the guy, if you're trying to go all in for one Grizzly, and obviously you've missed your window at this point, but, post Marcus Smart injury, post Desmond Bane injury, I think he's the guy that not only looks like he's going to be, somebody who's, I wouldn't say a potential league winner, but you're going to go down as one of the bigger waiver wire ads of the year, but also somebody who now becomes pretty interesting as a future piece for them, because they've tried out a few of these wings. Roddy's been playing well of late as well. Been in the starting lineup, playing some more minutes. Zaire Williams, I don't know what's going on with him. Lottery pick not that long ago, kind of a weird pick at the time. Looked okay as a rookie, and then it's just kind of fallen off the map these last couple of years. Then Jake LaRavia has been injured and has never been much of a fantasy guy. But Williams, 20 points, 8 boards, and an assist, 8 of 12 from the field. Played 36 minutes. That was a team high yesterday. And, really since all these injuries set in, he's averaging 17.5 points, 7 rebounds, 3.5 assists, 1.4 steals, 0.8 blocks, and shooting 54% from the field.
Yeah, I wasn't 100% convinced on Williams, but he's definitely proven me wrong. The Grizzlies ended up giving him a 3-year, $6.6 million contract in January. Talk about a steal. It looks like at this rate, but he was mid-second round pick. Yeah, and you mentioned, so many of these other guys that got drafted by Memphis just have not really worked out. Like, LaRavia barely gets any time, and Roddy, they waived, I can't remember his name now, Lofton. They just waived Lofton. Yeah. So it's nice that they got Vince Williams in there. I think he will be a nice future piece for them. And you mentioned Gigi Jackson too. Like, I don't know what to believe with Gigi Jackson. Like, he's going to get up shots, but his efficiency is like he's shooting, 52, 50, 72 right now after shooting terribly in college, which could regress. And then if that regresses, he's on a 2-way deal. They could just send him to the G League once everyone is healthy. If anyone ever gets healthy for Memphis, I think he's a fine pickup in like 16-team leagues. Like, we're talking about deep stuff, but if you're in like a 12-teamer, it's just, I don't think I would even bother with Gigi Jackson, to be honest.
No, not in a 12-team league. I think most of his work has come on the scoring side of things, and I don't think he's providing a whole lot else to the point where it's been consistent enough that I would add him in like a 14 or a 16 team league. So no, I would not be really adding him in deeper formats right now. All right, let's hit a couple of questions. Hopefully those will continue to roll in. Keep throwing them in there, guys. I think so. This question from Mustache, I think this is in reference to the thumbnail from the video. That it is an Isaiah Hartenstein photo. We did not set that. We're not telling you to drop Hartenstein. Just to be very clear, I would not be dropping him right now. Obviously, he missed a couple of games. Was back yesterday, or was back over the weekend. Excuse me, and played limited minutes. But I think we should probably clear that up just so there's no confusion there. The Hartenstein versus Achiuwa split is going to be something to monitor, I think, in the short term. If they do bring Hartenstein along a little bit more slowly with this Achilles issue, and obviously, Julius Randle out, that's 36, 37 minutes that are just out of the rotation at this point. So I do think, we could see some Hartenstein and Achiuwa, maybe not playing together, but I think there's enough minutes to go around there.
Yes, I think I would not drop Hartenstein. Well, I also want to clear that up. I think the concern, if you have any, is that he was dealing with an Achilles injury, which can be bothersome and can flare up, and it's obviously a concern because any Achilles concern is a major concern. We've seen guys like Capella, deal with an Achilles on and off for 3 years, but Hartenstein saw 16 minutes his first game back. I think he'll work his way up. Yeah, I don't even remember if that was exactly what you asked me.
It was more of a point of clarification because a couple of people asked about Hartenstein, and again, that was, I think, in reference to the thumbnail for the video. Trey Murphy or Malcolm Brogdon, if we're talking rest of season value in a 9-cat league. Interesting question. Obviously, very different players, very different situations. Both have been a little bit banged up lately. Brogdon, when he's been out there, continues to play well. Obviously, there's some concern about, does he get traded? If he doesn't get traded, he's one of the most obvious shutdown candidates of all time. Murphy, meanwhile, did not play on Saturday against the Bucks. Started the previous game against OKC. Right now it's a little bit difficult to get a full read on Trey Murphy. I'm usually pretty pro when it comes to him. Obviously, he is very 3-point dependent, Alex, and the 3-point shooting has not been good lately. He's been in a slump. His last 6 games, he's shooting 26% from 3 on high volume. So not only is that a disappointment in that category, but of course it's tanking his field goal percentage as well.
Yeah, Murphy, last year with Ingram and Zion playing less than 82 combined games, he saw 31 minutes and was the 83rd player in 8-cat. So it's going to be pretty hard for Murphy to be to reach top 80 again if Ingram and Zion are going to be healthy and he's not seeing 30 plus minutes a game. He can develop and he can get better, but he's also, I think, still dealing with that, probably, still a little bit hampered by, I think it was a meniscus tear to start the season. I do think Murphy's probably safer long term. If you are near the top of your league, I would rather hang on to Murphy. But if you are trying to creep up the standings, if you're in the middle of the pack or low in the standings and you just need production right now, I would grab Brogdon. So I think it depends on where you are.
Yeah, there's a difference to me between who would you rather have for the next month versus rest of season. And maybe it's more of when does your season end? How flexible are your leagues in terms of midweek moves if something were to happen? There's no doubt to me that if you could guarantee me that both situations remain the same for the rest of the season, Brogdon is the better player for fantasy. I think that to me is kind of a lock. Also an elite free throw shooter, which is, he's been on fire at the line of late. So if you look at it that way, I think I would lean Brogdon. But again, there's certainly some risk here with any player over 25 years old on the Blazers. As that season wears on, those guys could be in the mix for a trade or a shutdown. Johnny says, "What's up, fellas?" Pink waving emoji. I've not seen that emoji, but what's up, man? Give you a wave back. Appreciate you listening along. Good question on Jaden Ivey. Is he a drop in 9 category leagues for Josh Hart? And as you mentioned earlier, Alex, I think Josh Hart could be the single biggest beneficiary over these next few weeks with the dislocated shoulder for Julius Randle.
He could. Hart, played 32 minutes in this Miami game, this most recent game that I think that was when Randall suffered the injury, right? The
Yep.
game against Miami. 14, 9, and 5. We've seen Hart top out in 2 years ago, 3 years ago, depending on how you want to say it. 21-22, where he played for the Pelicans to start the year and then got moved to Portland. He ranked 67th in 8 cat. He was playing 33 minutes a game. Now in Portland, he saw a ridiculous usage that he will never see again, I bet. I think Hart can be a top 100 player for the duration that Randall is out. So obviously you're weighing that against Ivey, who has played really well lately, but Cade is basically coming back healthy now. I would like to think that Monty Williams will continue to play Jaden Ivey, upwards of 30 minutes, but I don't have a lot of faith in that. And I don't know. Ivey's over the past 15 games, Ivey has averaged 17, 4.5 and 4.5. I don't think Hart can get quite there, but if they scale Ivey's numbers back, like if they scale his minutes back by like 5, I think the numbers are actually going to be pretty close. I think it's actually less risk with Hart at this point. It's going to be sort of my final answer. There's less risk adding Hart compared to keeping Ivey with Cade Cunningham coming back.
Yeah, and Cade, they said he was good to go yesterday. Obviously, didn't need him. One of the weirdest results of the year. Detroit just like handily beating the Thunder all afternoon.
Right.
It was a late scratch. You would think he'll have a pretty good chance to get back out there. I believe they don't play till Wednesday at Cleveland. So if he's not out there, that's maybe a little bit more alarming. And then they play Friday and Sunday. So it is a 3-game week for Detroit. If you're looking at this as like a last roster spot streamer, maybe in that situation you lean Josh Hart because of the schedule advantage. But at the same time, I mean, the problem with Detroit is like we have no idea what Monty Williams is going to do, right? Like there are numbers you can look at that say Jaden Ivey's usage rate drops by 7 percentage points when he's out there with Cade Cunningham. But then you're like, there was also really weird stuff going on early in the season when Cade was playing 40 minutes and they're bringing Ivey off the bench and he's playing 16 minutes. So it's hard to kind of factor in the rise in consistency and really the way that Ivey's played better with Cade Cunningham out of the lineup. Like, is there more trust in him now than there was earlier in the season? My guess is yes. And Josh Hart has been pretty up and down and mostly underwhelming this season. Obviously, you'd kind of like the benefit of seeing a couple games of what that looks like, but I hate to say it. I mean, in a 9-cat league, I feel better about Hart, because of the turnovers for Ivey. But I trust that Detroit will at least be throwing Ivey out there for 26 to 30 minutes, even if that means he's going back to the bench with Cade coming back. So I would lean slightly toward Ivey.
Yeah. I mean, across the whole season, Ivey sees 5 fewer minutes with Cade available and averages 13 fewer fantasy points with Cade available. But again, like you said, does he have trust now? Has he earned the trust of Monty Williams? And again, it's hard to say. I wish I had a more definitive answer. It's just, I think it's going to be close. It's going to be close.
All right, good question here from Matt. And we should have led the show with this. Ben Simmons available to play tonight.
My God.
Kind of, I wouldn't say totally out of nowhere, but somewhat out of nowhere. He was practicing in the G League for a little bit, was recalled over the weekend, and then we got that note yesterday afternoon that he's listed as probable and is now off the injury report entirely for tonight's game against the Utah Jazz. It is a 3-game week for the Nets. Matt's question, would indicate that he's probably in a daily lineup league, so maybe not quite as concerned about that. But Matt says, should we sit guys like Evan Mobley and Ben Simmons tonight with them expected to be on minutes restrictions? 12 games today, so he has other options. I would say yes. I mean, Simmons, I don't trust this. I think it's far more likely that 2 weeks from now he's back on the injury report, and we're just kind of on this continuous wheel of him being in and out. Mobley, I mean, Bickerstaff basically came out and said, he's going to play in the low 20s. Sometimes coaches will stretch that a little bit, but I think if you're looking at it just for tonight with 12 games, I wouldn't start either of those guys.
Yes, for Simmons, you're 100% right. I need to see 20 minutes in the box score before I even think about putting Simmons in a starting lineup. I need to see it first. Mobley, I mean, if there's so many games tonight, you're clearly in a daily moves league, I would just look elsewhere. to be honest. I mean, maybe Mobley puts up similar numbers to some guy playing 35 minutes off your bench, but I wouldn't even risk it.
Johnny says, what do you guys think about picking up Jacob Toppin if he gets called up from the G League with the Randall injury? I wouldn't like go grab him now prematurely. I mean, if you're in a really deep league or like a dynasty league, maybe a league where you have some slots like our RotoWire Dynasty League. You got these like basically developmental spots where you could kind of pick and trade players like Toppin. But I mean, he's still in the G League. It's Tibbs. He doesn't really have a track record of somebody who's completely unproven at the NBA level being called up and, one, being in the rotation, two, playing enough minutes where it would matter. So I wouldn't pick him up. Maybe we'll look foolish in 2 weeks when Jacob Toppin is going crazy, but no, I don't think it's worth it.
I wouldn't do it. Tibbs loves his guys. He loves guys with NBA experience. The Knicks have enough depth to make up for with guys already on the roster.
Tibbs is allergic to the G League. I don't think he even knows that the Knicks have a G League team.
Probably not.
Eric says, would you find it crazy to drop Caris LeVert in a 14-team, 9-category league? He says he's punting threes, and LeVert's percentages are a roller coaster at times. Yes, they are. Thanks to both of you. Thanks for the question, Eric. Thanks for listening and watching along. Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty good description of Caris LeVert. Roller coaster, right? One of the few players in the league that's capable. I mean, he's kind of Harrison Barnes-like, honestly, in some ways, maybe a little higher scoring ceiling night to night, but he'll go through those weeks where you're just like, why did I think it was a good idea to start him? And then there'll be other weeks where he'll average 25 a game for 4 or 5 games straight. It's been a little bit down lately, missed a couple of games early last week, came back pretty uninspiring. In their last 2 games against Milwaukee, I don't think it's crazy to drop him in a 14-team league. No, I don't think it's insane. As always, depends who's out there, but I don't think it's that crazy.
I don't think it's crazy. I don't think I would do it until I would maybe want to wait until Garland comes back and then do something there. I mean, yeah, LeVert's a solid 3-point shooter. He's giving you, 2 over his past 15 games. He will get picked up 100%. He will get picked up. I would probably hesitate until Garland comes back. It's hard for me to endorse that. But if you don't need the threes at all and you're leaning into other categories, I think there are guys on the waiver wire that probably can give you, for what your team is targeting, like just as good, if not better, production for your specific setting.
Good trade question here from our guy Rodney. He says he traded DeJounte Murray and D'Angelo Russell for Michael Porter Jr. and Stephen Curry. 12-team points league. Who won the deal? I don't hate, capitalizing on this hot stretch from D'Lo.
This entirely hinges on D'Lo. Yeah. If D'Lo gets traded and stops doing this being like, 28-6 over his past 8 games, which, would probably go down to 22-6 if he's shot normally. You're going to win if D'Lo gets traded and comes off the bench or sees lower usage. You're going to lose if D'Lo, for some reason, doesn't get traded and keeps doing this, or gets traded to a team where he's playing 35 minutes a game and has the sort of leash, which it seems like he's going to get traded.
Yeah. I'm not the biggest Michael Porter guy for fantasy. It's kind of started to feel like he's not going to reach the heights that we thought he might a few years ago. And he stayed healthy. That's the thing. It's like, that was always the thing with him. It's like, man, if he could stay healthy, he'll be a superstar. And it just doesn't really feel like he's followed that trajectory. This is a really interesting one because normally I would say you got Steph Curry, it's a home run. But ironically, like Russell's been a better fantasy player than Curry over the last 2 weeks. Very small stretch. And it's been a bit of a down month overall for Stephen Curry by his standards. I don't really know if there's a clear winner right now because, like you said, it hinges entirely on D'Lo. And obviously DeJounte Murray could very well be traded too. But you're eliminating some risk here, right? Like Michael Porter's not going anywhere. You know exactly what you're getting the rest of the way. And you got the best player and the most consistent player in the deal in Stephen Curry. So I don't think we're going to look back at the end of the year and say, man, Curry just had a terrible last 60 games. I think he's going to snap out of this. And I think he'll, probably return borderline top 10 value, top 15 value at worst the rest of the way. And you'll be okay with that one. Another question on Ivey. You talked about him a little bit ago. Ant says, hey fellas, is Ivey a hold? He's thinking about dropping him for Precious or Konchar. Appreciate the advice. Yeah, we've hit on all these guys so far. I picked up Achiuwa, but I wasn't dropping anybody on the level of Ivey. And I'm trying to think, would I have done the same thing? Would I have dropped Ivey for Achiuwa? I don't think I necessarily would have. I think all three of these guys are very rosterable. Achiuwa, to me, I'm pinning my stake league hopes basically on Precious Achiuwa. So I'm obviously optimistic about what he can do. On the Konchar front, I think I'd still lean Ivey there. Konchar's value over the last 3 weeks has been so heavily dependent on those defensive stats, which, as you mentioned earlier, can you depend on someone like John Konchar blocking 2.5 shots a game? I don't know.
Konchar is listed at 6'5", not 6'8", not 6'9". He's 6'5". So the block numbers seem a little inflated. I'm 100% with Nick. For those two guys specifically, Precious and Konchar, I would just hold Ivey and see what happens. They're not such a sure thing that I would risk the chance that now Monty Williams trusts Ivey, or that Cade can't stay healthy or something like that.
Good follow-up here from our guy, Matt. Did you know Precious Achiuwa's siblings' names are God's Gift, God's Will, Peace, Grace, and Promise? That makes sense. I definitely knew about God's Gift because I think he played at St. John's back in the day. I remember that was he's older than Precious. So that was my introduction to the Achiuwa family and this lineage of fantastic names. But man, God's Gift and God's Will. Could you see yourself as like a God's Will Barutha?
No, alternatively, I may have been named Eric.
Really?
God's Gift was not, I don't think, on the table for me.
That's real though. You were almost an Eric?
It was between Alex and Eric, yeah.
Really? I was always told it was Nick or Jackson, which I don't mind the name Jackson. Eric's a solid name too. It's like I have one of my buddies from back home. His name is Mike. Solid name. He said the other option for him was Heath. He's like, my life would be so much different if I was named Heath. be like really into like snowmobiling and four wheelers. Like I feel like a name like that sets you on a different path. Johnny says, is Paul Reed worth a pickup for today with Joel Embiid out? Probably. I mean, there are 12 games. So if you're playing the single day streamer, you should have some options. Like, he's coming off of that big game against Denver. That was by far his best performance in any fill-in game for Embiid this season. And we have a decent sample. We got 9 of them. Even including that big game, he's only averaging 12.5 points, 7 rebounds, 2 assists, 1.2 steals, 1.2 blocks, but pretty good, pretty well-rounded. I think I would add him. It depends on your league size and who's out there. But if you're just doing the one game Embiid fill-in, based on what you saw against Denver, there's a good chance you might be kicking yourself if you don't. And they have a pretty good matchup against Portland, which, without Embiid, that becomes maybe a more competitive game. And we see Paul Reed, play into the 30s for minutes.
Yeah, I echo everything you said. He's averaging over a fantasy point per minute while a starter. Portland sucks. Stream in Paul Reed if you can, for sure.
Yeah. I will say too, I mean, you might want to, if you're really on the fence, Maxi's questionable. Tobias Harris is a game time call. It's like, if those guys don't play, then you absolutely get them in there. It's like part of the reason we saw these weird stat lines for the Sixers against Denver. It's like, it wasn't just Embiid out. Those guys were both out. Patrick Beverley went crazy. DeAnthony Melton's still out. Straight answer is yes, but especially if at least 2 of those 3 are out. Chris Michael says, Alex Nick, what are your thoughts about Cam Johnson and Shaedon Sharpe for 12 cat? Is it safe to move on from them or stash? I don't know. Maybe that's 12 team. Could be 12 cat. I think typically when we get these 12 cat or, anything above 10, it's, double doubles, triple doubles. So probably doesn't really impact a whole lot here. We talked last week, Alex, about Shaedon Sharpe and potentially stashing him. Like, I don't think he's a shutdown risk. We saw him go crazy at the end of last season. Portland, as bad as they've been, they kind of have more options now than they did late last year when they shut everybody down. If you got the room to stash Shaedon Sharpe, I would certainly think about it. Cam Johnson, to me, is the more interesting one, just because he's been disappointing, right? Like, we didn't think we'd be getting questions mid-season about, like, are we stashing this guy? Should I even have him on my roster?
Yeah, he's just been kind of underwhelming. Like, his shooting, people are freaking out about his 3-point shooting. If you take a 14-game sample, he's 40% from 3. He's averaging, he's making 2.5 a game. But the rest of his stat profile is really weak. Like, he's not doing anything. He's basically just turned into like a 3-point shooter for them. And maybe he still can reach like the 89 per game value that he did last year, but I kind of doubt it. I'm fine dropping him in a 12-teamer. I think somebody will probably pick him up because if you're in the mindset of like, is he streamable on a 4-game week? Of course, he is very streamable on a 4-game week. That's like the argument to keep him on your roster. On the other hand, if you're low in the standings, you just need a jolt every single week, right? And Johnson is not going to give that to you. You may as well just like chase other streamers. And for Sharpe, you mentioned it. Like, I think Sharpe is extremely overrated as a fantasy player when everybody is available. He's almost like just a points guy when everybody's available. But on the risk that other guys on Portland get moved or shut down or whatever, and he starts handling the ball again, then yeah, he's, I think it's fine to hang on to him for that chance.
Should I keep Luke Kennard? Good question. Kennard already has been ruled out for tonight's game. Grizzlies are home for the Sacramento Kings. They play Thursday, Friday in a back-to-back, and then Sunday at Boston. So it is a 4-game week. They have a 3-game week next week, and then pretty much everybody's on a short week. They have 3 games before the All-Star break. I don't know, man. I'm a little worried about this knee because it's the same one that cost him all that time earlier in the season. They're just calling it soreness. I think it was a bone bruise earlier in the year. So it's tough to say if that's truly related. But if he's out there, he's been giving you like 3.5 threes a game with all these Grizzlies injuries. Again, after this week, like he doesn't have another 4-game week until like March. So if you're in a daily league, that's not as big of an issue. If you're in a weekly league, I would say you probably don't really want to wait it out because he might be a borderline starter anyway, depending on your league size.
Yeah, I would love to hang on to him just because he's been very good as a starter. Like, he's given you assists and threes. He's played really well. But yeah, he's not really a young guy for them. He's 27. They're not like giving Kennard developmental minutes. They're giving him minutes because they have to play a guy and he's there. It's possible. I wouldn't be surprised if he got traded, actually, because he's on technically an expiring deal. His contract for next year is a team option at $14 million. So it's possible they've showcased him enough and they might play it really safe with him and then try to trade him to like a contender that needs a 3-point shooting. Again, I don't hate the idea of dropping him, but if you have the spot available, I would prefer to hang on. It's just it's such a tough call. It's a great question.
The Admiral Nida says, who's the better stash for the trade deadline? Ben Simmons, Keontae George, or Amen Thompson? Not Ben Simmons for me. I'm gonna rank him third. I'm out.
That's fine. Yeah, I think the Nets could certainly pull a plug if there is any plug to even pull with how bad they are. But I don't trust Simmons to stay healthy. I don't know what the Jazz are up to be honest with you. They're 24 and 23. Looks like they might hit the play-in, but they, again, they might prioritize next year. But Sexton's also playing so well. I don't know if they trade Sexton. And then Amen Thompson. I don't think Houston actually pulls the plug. I think they're going to just hang on because I think they've committed so much to Fred VanVleet and being good in the immediate future. I don't know. Better stash. I think upside wise, Ben Simmons probably has the most upside if you're just talking fantasy points per minute. If each of these guys got 35 minutes, but then it might go to Thompson and then probably George. We know about George's percentages.
Yeah, I've just not been a huge Keontae George guy for fantasy specifically. And if you're in a 9-category league, the turnovers have actually been a little bit better lately. He was turning it over a ton early in the season, and he hasn't had as many of those disaster games of late. But I also, he was playing 30 plus minutes for a good stretch earlier in the year. So even if Utah, which has played well lately, they're sitting in 10th right now. I guess they could technically ship out, Jordan Clarkson, somebody like that, and maybe that opens up a little more time for Keontae George. But we've kind of seen, what he is, even when he's playing 30, 35 minutes a night, and you're still getting the same variability. You're still getting the same, kind of nothing type of games or 2 of 11 type of performances. So I think for me, Amen Thompson's most interesting. It's just, who does Houston trade, right? It's like, who wants, are you trying to part ways with Dylan Brooks, who you just signed? Like, is somebody bringing him in with 3.5 years left on his deal? I don't think so. It does feel like they're going to need to consolidate at some point between Jabari Smith, Tari Eason, Cam Whitmore, Amen Thompson, Jayshawn Tate, Jeff Green's been in the rotation. Guys like that, they have dudes that they should probably consider shipping out, but I don't know if they'll do that. But I'm the most tantalized with Amen Thompson's upside the rest of the way, because you forget how much time he missed early on. He kind of got a late start compared to the rest of these rookies.
Yeah, everything you said makes sense.
All right, we'll do this one quickly, but good kind of general knowledge question. In head-to-head category leagues, what stat levels are considered elite in each category?
Assuming you mean like per player, there's actually, if you are, I don't even know if you have to be a subscriber to RotoWire to access the specific ratings. There's I could, here, you know what I'll do? I'll post this in the chat right now. This link. If you go to the link, we have a ratings page on RotoWire. So if you go to the NBA side, there's a rankings tab. You go to ratings, you click that. That's basically like our seasons per game rankings, how guys are doing for the whole season. So if you sort by, like, let's say assists, we have a Z score set up, which, long story short, a Z score is like how much better are you than average? Mm-hmm. So I don't know what you would consider elite, but I think just, ripping off this page, like 11 rebounds is probably elite for rebounds. Points, it's probably something like 30. Assists, anything over 8, I think you could probably consider elite. Mm-hmm. Steals, I don't know, over 1.6, 1.7. Blocks is like 2.5. Threes is like 3.5. Things like that. So you can kind of mess around with that page and see what's up there.
Yeah, it's also interesting. You could go all the way back to, I think, 2010, 11. Our tech team is putting a ton of work on this page. We use it all the time. When we reference, like, oh, this guy ranks 30th over the last 30 days. That's usually where we're pulling it from. So it's really interesting to look back and also note how what I would say is an elite level is way different now than it was even 5 years ago. That's something I've thought about a lot. In terms of, I didn't like, make a point to go get Joel Embiid in like my auction league specifically, or Luka Doncic, and you're like, man, those guys put up 73 points. I mean, that's like that even from like another star player, it's like that might be a week from someone like Pascal Siakam. If he's playing 3 games, he might give you 73 total, or even some 4-game weeks. So I do think those specific categories, specifically points, what it means to be elite. Like we got 4 guys right now averaging at least 31 points a game. I mean, Embiid's up at 36 points per game. Threes is the other one I think that has changed most. If you used to be somebody averaging like 2.5 made threes, that was like, whoa, all right, you're like close to the top of the league. Curry was kind of on his own island, and he still is this season, by the way. He's averaging like 0.8 more made threes than anybody else. But not only have the elite guys raised their volume, but the middle level, I think, is the biggest thing. I mean, you have like, well over 100 players averaging, like at least 1.4, 1.5 threes per game.
Yep. And an important thing to note if you're looking at that page, and just like in general for fantasy, if you're playing cats, is percentages are weighted by volume. So, a guy taking more free throws at like 75% is going to do more if you're affecting your free throw percentage than a guy shooting 95% on like 2 attempts. Yeah. So like, for example, if you sort by like best players affecting free throw percentage, it's Embiid right now at number 1, shooting 88%, who actually does more for you than Lillard shooting 92% at his volume. It's kind of a weird nuance in fantasy, but almost everybody who's giving you something that I would consider very good in the free throw category is over 85% on pretty high volume. Yeah,
that was a very good succinct analysis. And again, go check out that page. It's just, it's under our stat drop down and ratings, where you can find all that. And Alex dropped it in the chat as well. Jonathan Isaac question. So Jonathan Isaac's injury management minutes issue was his or Orlando's idea. Weird for him to jump up to 20 minutes to 2 straight games. I agree. Now he's not on the injury report the day after. Very weird. Yeah, I mean, I just haven't really been thinking about Jonathan Isaac. I think everybody that's watching right now has probably been harmed by Jonathan Isaac at some point throughout their days playing fantasy basketball. If this becomes a trend, it becomes interesting again. But Alex, he's kind of in the Ben Simmons zone for me, where it's just that promise is there. You look and right now he's averaging like the second best block rate of his career. The steal rate's actually down this season, but the minutes have been low. Like, we're not that far removed from talking about him as like a future defensive player of the year, but I don't really know if I trust it. This has been a strange situation.
If you're in a deep enough league, like 16, I think it's fine as like an exploratory ad. If you have the space, you're doing well in your league, you can get rid of the spot or whatever. You can't be adding a guy like Isaac if you're struggling, because he's just not, it's not consistent enough production. But it is weird. It is absolutely weird. But I just don't think he's ever going to see like over 25 minutes a game consistently with the way Orlando's roster is, with his injury issues. So he's sort of more like a deep league streamer, I think, almost like for the foreseeable future.
All right. We will hit as many more of these as we can. We got about 10 more minutes or so. Is there any player you would trade Luka for? Asks our friend Matt. He says, I have Luka and Kyrie, and they don't play many games in the fantasy playoffs. He's in a Yahoo points league.
Oh, yeah.
Man, that's tough. I mean, obviously there's a case for Embiid. There's a case for SGA. There's a case for Jokic. That's probably where I would draw the line.
Yeah. Yeah, I know the fantasy playoffs issue is definitely it's a concern. I remember hearing, knowing about like those guys, not people that want to draft them for that reason. But to actually answer your question, it really has to be a guy like basically in the MVP conversation that's also a good fantasy player. Like, like Nick said, Embiid, maybe Anthony Davis, SGA, guys like that. I think
the in a points league is at least a discussion.
Yeah, we're talking points league, right? So it's like Giannis is in there. I don't think I would go, like, if you're just talking straight up fantasy points per game, I don't think I would go lower than like 5 compared to what Luka's averaging. And that would be a pretty significant step down. So, if I don't know exactly what he's averaging, he's got to be 55 or 60. Let's say he's averaging 55. I don't see it off the top of my head. I could look it up. But if he's at 55, I'll see where he actually is. 61. Jesus. 61 fantasy points per game for Doncic. I wouldn't go below 55 if you're trading for anybody, All
right. Let's hit a couple of these rapid fire. Is Bilal Coulibaly a stash in a 12-team head-to-head 9-category league? I don't know. Not for me, probably not. I think he's already playing enough minutes that if there were to be some sort of shutdown, you'd probably see a slight boost, but I don't know. I don't think he's the type of guy that you're like, all right, here's 30% usage rate, go crazy. So for me, if it's a yes or no question, it'd be a no.
I think people want Coulibaly to happen more than it is likely to happen. And like Nick said, he's getting a decent amount of minutes. There's, I can try to do this very quickly. I'm doing some on off right now where I'm like ripping Jordan Poole and Kyle Kuzma off the court to see like what if Coulibaly's usage increases by a lot. With Poole and Kuzma off the court, Coulibaly's usage goes up by 4.6%, which is what I would consider decent, but not like game changing. He's a stash again if you can afford it. If you're at the top of your rankings, like if you're top 3 in your league, do it. If you are below that, you just need production right now, and that's not what Coulibaly's doing.
Angel or Angel Figueroa says Kuminga or Draymond in a points league. Interesting.
Wow.
They've both been good since Draymond's been back, but have just very different statistical specialties, I guess is one way to put it. I think I would lean Kuminga in a points league.
I think I would too. I'm double checking.
Yeah,
it's close. I think it's actually a toss up. It's a toss up for me, but I'm fine rolling with Kuminga. I don't think there's a problem with that.
Okay. Another good question. Should I accept Tyrese Maxey for my Anthony Edwards?
Tyrese Maxey for your Anthony Edwards. Yeah, Maxey has slowed down a little bit compared to earlier in the season, but over the past 30 days, he's still ranked 36th in 8-cat, while Edwards is ranked 35th in 8-cat, of course.
Yeah.
Should you do it? I think I'm cool with it either way. I don't think anybody's going to end up winning that trade.
No.
Yeah, I don't think anybody to me, it's a wash.
Yeah.
If you
this
want.
is kind of a what do you need question for me, and the stat lines are relatively similar in general. But I mean, the one thing where Maxey has the key edge, I would say, is free throw shooting. He's more efficient, takes about the same amount. But I think these guys are like dead even the rest of the way, which says more about it. I think the crazy season that Maxey's had, because Edwards has been maybe a slight disappointment, but it's not like he's playing badly. You could say with Edward or with Maxey, is there a chance that Philly takes a big swing at the deadline? Do they talk themselves into Zach LaVine? There is a scenario, where they do that, and then you're probably going to wish that you had Edwards. So that's just one last thing I would say if that breaks the tie for you. Let's see. We already talked about Cam Johnson and Shaedon Sharpe. Paul says, is there a possibility of Portland sitting Simons, Houston sitting Şengün, and or Chicago sitting Coby White toward the end of the season? Good question.
I don't think Chicago sits Coby.
No.
He's young and he's in theory a part of their future if they do decide to rebuild. And I think they just want reps. They just want him to get reps. I don't think Houston will sit Şengün. Again, another young guy. They're in a weird spot though at 21 and 24 if they're starting hot. Portland sitting Simons, I think that's actually the most likely because Portland is so bad. And Simons is 24. I feel like that could go either way. I feel like they won't sit him because part of me feels like, Portland's horrible with him playing anyway. And part of me feels like they'll sit their other vets. They'll trade Brogdon and they'll be like, hey, Simons, you want to score 35 every night? That'll be awesome for us and for you. So I don't think any of those are particularly that likely.
No, I'm least worried about Coby White. I'm really not worried about Şengün either. I mean, Houston, I think it's pretty likely to be that Houston is at least like in the play-in mix until the end of the season. It's like if he were to sit, maybe it would be like the last week, but I just don't see it. I don't don't know what the motivation would be. He's still young enough. You're developing him. You want as many reps as possible. Houston does owe a top 4 protected pick to the Thunder, but they're not going to feel good about their chances to get into the bottom 4 here. So I don't think we see anything weird at the end of the year where they try to save that pick. They also have Brooklyn's first rounder coming in. I believe that's completely unprotected. So that kind of cancels out anyway. Simons, you could maybe see it, but because Portland is like on that line where like they could, I think right now they have the 5th worst record and they're like 3 games better than Charlotte. So maybe at the end of the year, if they really want to try to push for top 4 lottery odds, I could see it. But the other two, I'm not really worried about at all. All right.
I will say, I think it's more so that Brogdon is helping them win games. So the Brogdon move, I think, is going to make a lot more difference than like a Simons situation.
Admiral Nita says, which player should I drop to bring Kyrie and Evan Mobley off of IR? It's going to drop 2 of Draymond, Wiggins, and Wendell Carter. Tough call.
I think I would drop Wiggins. I think that to me is like the very quick, like my snap decision. I'm 100% cool to drop Wiggins. Wendell Carter versus Draymond's a little interesting because Wendell Carter's been playing better lately. I think honestly, I think their upside is pretty similar in terms of like even 12 team cats, pretty similar upside. I will say Wendell Carter gets hurt all the time. He got hurt earlier this season. He has never played more than 62 games in a year. I'd be worried about him getting hurt again. Maybe Draymond gets suspended again. Who knows?
Possible.
But I guess if you made me pick, gun to my head, as they say, I would drop Wiggins and Wendell Carter. But I think any combination of those two, if one of them involves Wiggins, is fine.
Yep, I'm with you there. Carter versus Green is really tough. I'd probably drop Wendell Carter. he's been great for a week and a half. He's been really bad and injured for like 15 other weeks. So that would just kind of break the tie for me. All right, let's see what else we got here. Interesting question relating to the Hawks from Corey Jack. He says, thoughts on Onyeka Okongwu, odds Capella gets traded. I mean, the Hawks are a disaster right now. They're 19 and 27. They are in 10th. I mean, we're talking about I would say a likely play-in team at this point. But I mean, it feels like when they lose, they've just been like, it's been so bad. You know, all their losses feel like blowouts lately. Capella could get traded. You know, he expires after next year, so you're getting a year and a half. I don't 22 mil next year. I don't think that's like that big of an albatross. I don't know how many teams really want that archetype of player right now. I mean, really the team that comes to mind would be the Knicks. It's like would they view him as kind of a Mitchell Robinson replacement? Although we'll see if Robinson could get back. Other than that, he's just one of those guys that everybody is like, yeah, he's a good player. We don't really want him though. But yeah, I mean, at some point they're going to unleash Okongwu. I really hope so, man. I have him on like every long-term league that I'm in. I'm like, I'm not punting on this guy. I think he's like, he reminds me so much of Bam when he's out there, and they just refuse to play him. I don't know. I will say the odds that Clint Capella gets traded to me, 45%.
That's fine. Yeah, part of me wonders if he qualifies. Is he a negative asset at $22 million for next year? You know, would they have to actually make a move? Like, would it almost be a glorified like salary dump to get rid of
I don't know.
Capella? So yeah, like Nick said, how many guys are looking for? Presumably, you're bringing in Capella, probably not to be your starter unless you are the Knicks. And then you want a guy playing 20 minutes for $22 million. Maybe Orlando try something, but I think they like Wendell Carter Jr., etc. Look, I think if you can stash Okongwu on your roster until the trade deadline, just to hope, do it, because Okongwu is again someone who's fine to roster, because you can play him when they have Hawks are on a 4-game week or something, and it's going to be nice, but it's tough to say.
Can Harrison Barnes keep up this production? We'll do this one quickly because we addressed it at the top of the show. No, definitely not. But that did not stop me from going out and picking him up in a very important league this weekend. He scored 32, 39, and 20 in 3 straight games. Prior to that, you can take a pretty large sample here. We'll take his last, 25 games before this little spree. He averaged 9 points on 47% shooting. The thing is, he's been efficient. It's not like he's having a bad year. He just has a low usage rate and doesn't really do anything. No, I mean, the much, much larger sample suggests that this is one of his like 2 or 3 times a year where he goes crazy and reminds people that he's actually pretty good. But in general, I think you should probably expect closer to like 12 points, 3 or 4 rebounds, 1 or 2 assists. Cross your fingers for a block and a steal.
The past 5 years, 7 years of data on Harrison Barnes tells you that like his best case scenario is he's maybe the 125th ranked player in Cats and gets 27 fantasy points. And that's if he does that for like a really long stretch, which I don't think he's suddenly going to do now. So I'm cool with picking him up while he's hot, like Nick said, but he could just as easily go back to averaging 12 a game for the rest of the year.
All right. I don't know if this is a question or just a statement from Christopher, but this is interesting. He said, the one thing that drives me crazy with all fantasy analysis people alike, it's important to play the guys with a 4-game week as opposed to the 3 or 2. How often do any of them even play 4 in a week? So if we're reading this correctly, is this an assessment that it's not that important to have a difference between 2, 3, 4 games because, with rest and injuries, guys don't likely play 4 anyway? Is that your read of this?
I think it's more of like, there's a pretty good, you have like a 35th ranked player on 3 games and like a 60th ranked player on 4 games. Why play the worst player when the chances of them not playing 4 games is pretty high? My argument, against this would be the player has more chances to play more games.
Yeah.
Than the odds of them playing, like you can miss. I think the odds of a guy missing 1 game are the same. So then it doesn't really matter. Like if you play a guy in a 3-game week I think his chances of missing a game and then going down to 2 is just as high as a guy playing 4 games going down to 3, unless they are a known injury risk. If they're Al Horford or someone, or Gordon Hayward or whoever. But you have to, like, it sounds really primitive. Like, if you're in a points league, just add up the fantasy point averages and, multiply it by their chances to play, or like, the total stats across the board in a roto league. How many points, rebounds, assists is this guy possibly going to average if he plays all of his games? Because all we can assume is that a guy is going to play all the games in a week, unless, again, it's a known guy who sits back to backs or is always hurt or something like that.
And those guys have been fewer and further between this season, right? I mean, like, Kawhi's playing back-to-backs, right? I mean, LeBron and AD have stayed healthy. It's like a lot of these guys that we kind of stayed away from or were really cautious about, they've had better health than you'd expect. So, yeah, I think the number one point you brought up is you can make the same case. If you say, well, a guy in a 4-game week, you might only play 3. Well, if you have a 3-game week, you might only play 2. If you have a 2-game week, you might only play 1. And there's just not that many players right now who are like, oh, it's a back-to-back, he's for sure sitting out. You might mix it in every now and then. Like the T-Wolves did that with Mike Conley last week, although it wasn't even on a back-to-back, weirdly enough. There's just nothing you can do about that. And that's when you want a guy in a 4-game week, because then you're not kicking yourself and saying, oh man, I'm only getting 2 games out of this guy. All right. We got our daily Scoot Henderson question. Keep Scoot in a 9-cat league or use it as a streaming spot instead. I'd stream it for now. Unless you, I do think, I'm on record all year, Alex, that there's going to be a time when Scoot is good. I think he could have like a Shaedon Sharpe type of run at the end of the year. It just hasn't been happening, right? Like, if you're putting Scoot in like a weekly lineup right now, it is actively damaging your team more often than not. So I would stream it.
It's killer, man. 8 minutes against Indiana on January 19th, 6 minutes against the Spurs 2 games ago. It is really hard to recommend a guy who is dealing with that. Brogdon, I assume he's going to get traded, give Scoot a better chance, but Scoot hasn't done that much when he's been given more minutes. So, again, my advice, I give this blanket advice a lot. If you're near the top of your standings, sure. If you need production, if you're in the middle of your standings, you're 6th and you're trying to get the 3rd for cash or whatever it is, you got to just get guys on your roster who are doing stuff right now to climb up the standings.
Yep. Thoughts on Mark Williams and Zach LaVine? Look, I wish we had insider info on Williams specifically. We got the quote-unquote not close to returning update a little over a week ago. Who knows what that means? Charlotte has won 10 games this season. They're not rushing anybody back. I think at this point, got to expect that he's out through the All-Star break. That's a nice, like, 7-8 days off for Charlotte, where, maybe that's the kind of boost he needs, but I don't know, man. I mean, this could also just be a total lost season. And then LaVine, like, he's legit injured, but I also think this is a trade deadline thing. I don't think they really want to risk anything. I think he's likely going to be dealt. And the latest update on him came, I think, Friday. They said he's going to miss at least another week. So, if he's out all of this week, they play tomorrow, they play Wednesday, they play Saturday, and then they have 5 more games before the All-Star break. We'll see. I mean, that could also, the trade deadline's obviously sprinkled in there too. It's possible that he's played his last game for the Bulls.
Yeah. I think everything you said about both those guys is right. We don't have any, insights that aren't described on RotoWire or anything more than any other beat writer said.
Yep. All right, we'll do a couple more and then we'll be out. Interesting one here from Skeeter. Trade Porzingis for Turner and Wembanyama for Chet. Trying to prep for playoffs, scared of a Wemby shutdown, and KP continuing to sit games. Yeah, I mean, I don't mind the line of thinking here. I think the framework makes some sense. Wembanyama and Chet have been, at the very least, comparable this season. Wembanyama's, on balance, been the better fantasy player despite the minutes restriction. I'm with you on Porzingis. He got hurt over the weekend. Doesn't seem like it's too serious, but it just feels like you're always waiting for that injury to come.
Yeah, this is tough, man, because Turner has been like playing at like an 80th ranked level lately, and Porzingis is gonna get hurt. Wemby's been the 9th ranked player over the past 30 days.
Dude, he's
playing limited minutes. He's playing back-to-backs now. The minutes are back up. Chet's more in the 60 range during this stretch. I think it's fine to do if you're worried about those things, but it's man, I would be just as worried about either scenario. I'd be worried about trading. Like I'd worry that I'd flip the coin. It'd be the wrong thing no matter what. That's
Yeah. If you can, I would say I would wait to do this because I don't think the Wemby shutdown is imminent. I agree with you. I think it probably happens at some point, although I don't see the Spurs falling out of the bottom four. That's really the number one concern. But I think there is, it's almost like a pitcher with an innings limit, coming into the year. We've seen that with like young pitchers and even some older guys before, where it's, they're pretty firm on that. There's some dude for the Marlins this past year. Anybody who follows baseball is probably like, you're an idiot. This is like a big name guy, but that's kind of how I view Wembanyama. Like, I think they might have like a number in their mind of like this number of minutes. We've run the numbers with our training staff, and like there's like an optimal number for him where they want him to get a certain amount of experience without exposing him to risk. But the Spurs they played 46 games, so if he gets shut down, maybe it's a mix of you're mixing in some days off, or he misses the final 10 games of the year. Like, I don't see Wembanyama missing like the final 25 games. I would try to milk this as long as I can with Wembanyama.
Yeah, because last year what the Spurs did is they would just play guys like 2 games and then sit them.
Yeah.
2 games and then sit them. 1 game, sit. 3 games, sit. They wouldn't like shut guys down, but that's to an extent, like that's almost just as harmful because you think you're getting 3 games against 1. You can't even start the guy or whatever.
Yeah, exactly right. All right. We'll do, maybe 2 more. This might be the penultimate. Draymond Green, Rozier, or Hartenstein rest of season?
I mean, Rozier has not done that much since going to the Heat. 3 games, averaging 9 points on 11 shots. So that's going to increase. He'll probably average more like 14 or 15 points. His shooting's just been off. So I think, look, again, Rozier, I think he's going to be like 14-5 probably for the rest of the year based on what we've seen through 3 games, which is pretty solid. But I think there's a good chance that is worse than Draymond. And I think there is a good chance that is worse than what Hartenstein is doing for you. The Hartenstein Achilles injury is mildly concerning, but we don't know yet if he's going to have his minutes limited. So that's hard to say.
Yeah, I'm a little more optimistic on Rozier. Like, I think if he averages 14, 4, and 5 the rest of the way, like that'd be a little disappointing. I think you're hoping for more, but there are a lot of mouths to feed in Miami. Like, more than anything, it just depends on like, does Jimmy Butler continue to miss time? Does Tyler Hero miss 10 games at some point? It's like there are going to be weeks or stretches where I think Rozier plays really well. It's important to note Hartenstein, top 35 guy in category leagues in the last month. It's not only the high volume rebounds, but almost 2 steals a game, 1.5 blocks. So he's been probably even better than you might expect. So this is really difficult. And then Draymond, you're never like blown away by his stat line, but it kind of adds up for fantasy. I think I would rank them. I think I would go Hartenstein, Rozier, Draymond. I mean, Rozier versus Draymond is so close, such different players, but you got pretty good options there. All right, last real question. Then we got one more I want to hit. Joel says, should I flip LeBron for DeJounte Murray and Jabari Smith? I just lost Julius Randle and I lost John Morant. I feel like I need to make a move. 14-team category league.
Jabari Smith's all right. I mean, in a 14-team league, he should be rostered for sure. He's going to be a fringe starter for you, I think. I don't mind this trade. Murray is worse than LeBron in fantasy, but not a lot. They're separated by like 20 ranks in Cat over the past month or so. So getting Jabari Smith back, not bad.
I'd try to get a slightly better sweetener, mostly because I think DeJounte Murray could get traded to a worse situation. That situation could be playing with LeBron.
That is true, actually, yeah.
So I don't think this is like a terrible trade, but if somebody offered me LeBron for Murray and Smith, I think I would take it, is the way I would put that.
Yeah, that is a good point. We don't know about Murray's situation. You might want to wait until after the deadline, see what happens. Yeah.
I would just try to do a little better than Jabari for your second option. It depends on the guy's roster, obviously, or girls roster. But yeah, I don't know. I'm just not like I really like him. I just think he's been misused, and I'm not that excited about him for fantasy. We talked earlier about like the 7 3s and 4s that Houston has right now, and sorting through all that. So I would just try to do a little bit better because, I mean, LeBron's coming off of like his best statistical game of the year, right? 36, 20, and 12 the other night. Try to deal him to somebody who doesn't think he's going to get hurt and, see if you can really push the boundaries. Like I wouldn't go in with this offer. Like this is arguably fair, but I think I would start a little bit higher and make somebody say no. All right. Last one. Dennis says, love the Kings and Raptors artwork in the frames. There we go. Just put these up today. Can you share the artist? I can. I'll link his Twitter in the chat. Is Ryan Simpson. However, I got these a long time ago, probably like, I don't know, 7-ish years ago. And I don't know that the store is still active. I know every now and then he'll do, he'll tweet something out and be like, oh, the store is back up, but it's been very hit or miss. It hasn't been as consistent as it was. He used to sell a bunch of, really cool stuff, mostly NBA related, but some pop culture, some, football, basketball, baseball. So check it out. I would bookmark it and, maybe follow him on Twitter and just see, because I think the store will reopen at some point. But as of right now, when I go to his website, it says BRB, store will be back soon. So I wish I could help you out more, but that's where you can find that. All right, guys, thank you for all the questions in the chat. You guys make this a fun pod for us. We'll be doing this every Monday through the season, around 2:30 Central Time. I'll be back with Brandon Kravitz on Wednesday. That'll be around 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. And Alex will be talking waiver wire on Friday with Ken and Shannon. We'll have episodes Tuesday and Thursday as well. So keep an eye out for those. Go follow us on Twitter, RotoWire Fantasy Basketball. You can follow Alex and I at Whalen, at Barutha Alex. And please like, subscribe, throw some comments on the videos. We'll answer those on YouTube. But appreciate everybody listening and watching along as usual. And we will talk to you next Monday.